Now, unlike many other programming languages, JavaScript does not in fact define different types of numbers. In other languages, we have things called integers or perhaps floating points, short or long. Now, to be absolutely precise, JavaScript numbers are actually stored as what we call a double precision floating point number. Now, it sounds much more complicated than it is, and in this chapter, we're going to explore JavaScript numbers in a lot more detail than you'll typically find on the internet. So the title of this video is called The Literal Function and Constructor Syntax. Who knew there were so many ways to create a number? Now, in JavaScript, we tend to favor the what we call literal syntax. So let's go ahead and just create a number. So demonstrating the literal number, this, as we've covered in the previous videos, is what we've been essentially using. We've been simply defining the number as a literal. So whenever you see a number in its true numeric form, that is a number literal. So you may be thinking, okay, so how many other ways can we create a JavaScript number? Let's go ahead and just log each of these out. So here we have our literal number, and we can just go ahead and save them out. So there we go. We can see in our console, we have the number 99. And it's actually quite interesting at this point, if you're fairly new to JavaScript or at least new to the DevTools console, you can see if you inspect closely and perhaps on your computer as well, the number is in fact blue. Now, if we went and changed this to a string by wrapping it in quotes, the number then turns black. So that's a really good and fast way that we can just check whether we're using an actual number. So back to where we were, we're talking about literals and functions and constructors. Now in JavaScript, we have a number function, and it looks a little bit like this. So if we console log this, you can see that we have a function of number, which is native code. So this is part of JavaScript, and we covered this in our type section at the beginning of this course. Now, because it is a function, and we're going to dive much more deeply into functions in the next couple of chapters, but for now, because it's a function, we can simply call it with some brackets like this. Now, what we could do is pass a different number, such as 55, into it. So you can see here that we have the exact same result in terms of we get a number literal back, but the way that they were created slightly differs. So you may be thinking, why are we actually using this syntax? Now, the interesting part of where this number function comes into play is when we deal with things such as strings. So here we're going to create the number 33, but we're going to add it inside of a string. Now, when we use number as a capital N as a function, what this is trying to do is create a new number in a non-constructor context. Now, what that essentially means is that we're providing a type conversion and we're using the number as a function and not using the new keyword, and we'll show you the new keyword momentarily. So that's a good example of how to convert a string over to a number very quickly using this number function. But there are also other things that this number function gives us. So let's assume that we're dealing with perhaps 44, and it might be that we're dealing with the DOM and we're adding classes and style attributes or inline styles to a particular DOM node, and we want this 44px. Now, using number is not going to get us very far, because if we pass in something that cannot be converted from a valid string, we're actually going to get NaN. So JavaScript here is saying that this 44px is not a number. So the number function over here is now returning us under the scenes NaN as a particular value. And we're actually going to learn more about NaN in a dedicated video in this chapter. But for now, we're just showing you all the ways that you can create numbers and how we can think about them, what's valid and what is invalid. Now, the final thing that I want to show you is what I mentioned with the constructor context. So here we could say that we want a new number, and we're going to use the number of 66. Now we can save this out, and everything looks the same. Now, if we haven't actually dived too far deep into JavaScript just yet, but functions are first-class citizens, they are objects, which means that we can invoke them with the new keyword. So let's add the word new, and this will actually give us something different. You can see that we have this number object, and it has a raw primitive value of 66. You see the square brackets primitive value of 66. Now, this is where our JavaScript knowledge can enter into new territory. And in the next course, JavaScript Masterclass, we're going to be diving deep into prototypes, constructors, classes, prototypal inheritance. But for now, we just need to understand the idea behind these functions such as number and creating a new instance of a number. Now, in this context, this isn't actually very useful, having this new number wrapper around a primitive value. It doesn't really have any use case. It doesn't really make sense for us. Now, the same rules also apply. So if we use our invalid number syntax, we get that number wrapper object with a primitive value, again, of nan, not a number. So I wouldn't advise using this. Stick to our number literal way. But these are the ways that we can create numbers, the three different strategies, the literals, the function way, and also with the constructor syntax. Like most of the things in JavaScript, it is favored to use the literal syntax. So we'll be using these as we've already done in this course so far and thereafter. So what we'll do to finish this off is just add some comments, just to denote the three strategies. So here we have the literal syntax. Here we have the function syntax. I'll also add a note here to perform a type conversion in a non-constructor context. Now, by non-constructor, we mean this syntax here. So this is our constructor syntax, which simply creates a wrapper object. And I would honestly suggest that we avoid using it. But like everything in JavaScript, it helps us expand our knowledge, and there's nothing which is bad to learn. As long as we're not practicing bad habits and we're going about things the right way, we understand how JavaScript, the language itself, is composed, we can take full advantage of it. So that's all about how we can create numbers. Let's learn in the next lesson about integers and floating point numbers.